what got you interested in the mind?
Pretty much everybody's interested in the mind. I mean, you have to admit that.
I wasn't till I was 30 plus, I can promise you that.
Okay. Somebody once asked me, do you want to make money or do you want to save the world? I said to him, I don't know how to make money, so that's not going to happen. I don't mind trying to save the world. Climate change is our single biggest challenge.
This progress that we celebrate comes at a price.
There are winners and losers in every game, sadly. We are very far from being in a sustainable planet, right? So to assume that we could do some small things and get there, no, it's not going to happen.
One thing that you think we could all do?
Consume less.
Hello, everybody. I welcome to Thinkly episodes, and I am here. This is your host, Ashu Khanna. I'm here today with Rajesh Kasturirangan, a very unique profile, mathematician and cognitive scientist, while, of course, both of them bring, there's an element of maths or patterns everywhere, but one is the left side and one is the right side, if I get it correctly. He is the founder of Socrates and Climate X, solving complex global challenges on climate and ecological and social issues. The other interesting part for all of y'all is that, Rajesh and I met barely a couple of months ago, but we discovered that we grew up in the same neighborhood. We didn't know each other then, but life has its way of bringing and connecting us and just creating these very quick momentary connections and saying, hey, what can we do together to make the world a better place? And with that, I think in mind, with what each one of us tries in our own small way, I thought one of the things we could do is have a conversation to bring that alive and grow this friendship and collaboration from there. So welcome, Rajesh. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Ashu. It's lovely to be here. You forgot to mention that, since we grew up so close, my first and most important achievement was being a fast bowler in one of those playgrounds right next to where we lived.
What I did not, I guess, where that got missed was we did not have broken windows, thanks to you, which most of the neighborhood boys did.
Yes. But so lovely to be here. And it's an interesting times that we are living in. So I'm looking forward to this conversation to see where it goes.
In fact, I think it's a bit of a time which says, okay, you're in the US where climate change is becoming more of is it an issue which is still alive? And I'm in India where we think we should completely keep it alive. So let's see how we can across the globe create a shift and continue to keep the awareness going. But let's go back to what I introduced you as when you gave this smile when I said left side and right side of the brain, and mathematician and cognitive scientist. How did the two come together?
At some level, both are studying the mind. I guess that's what it is, right? So, and in fact, the history of cognitive science comes from mathematics. So it's a pretty smooth transition. So let's put it this way, that there are some precise ways scientifically of studying the mind. And then once you study the mind, you can see how it acts in the world. So that pretty much covers my life history.
That's too. I'm sure there's a lot more behind it. You've covered it very quickly, saying I wanted to study the mind, but what got you interested in the mind?
Pretty much everybody's interested in the mind. I mean, you have to admit that, right?
I wasn't till I was 30 plus, I can promise you that.
Okay. It so happened that the 1990s was the decade of the brain. There was a lot of new work happening. And I'm the kind of person who likes to do new things. And so I was trained as a mathematician, but maths is a fascinating, but you could say a somewhat well-trodden path. So I decided to go in a direction which was new. And I found myself getting interested in all these fantastic new developments, new technologies of studying the brain, new computer systems. As you know, we now are in the age of AI. So the kind of stuff that is now transforming our lives was just being invented then. So that was the reason.
Okay. So interest in AI, maths, all of that, and how did that lead to climate X?
I I guess so. Somebody once asked me, "Do you want to make money or do you want to save the world?" And I said to him, "I don't know how to make money, so that's not going to happen. Uh, but I don't mind trying to save the world." And it felt like climate change is our single biggest challenge. Um, if I'd been born, let's say 60, 70 years before I was, maybe nuclear war and nuclear weapons would have been it. But today it's climate change.
Hmm.
And so it's absolutely important for every single one of us to do something about it. And I found myself in a place like, okay, if we can change human minds in such a way that they are more receptive to addressing these big challenges, then what maybe I can use my specialization to do something about this.
So, when you look at actually actioning or creating change in this arena, how
Mhm.
has your background of philosophy, cognitive science lent to all of this?
The great thing about philosophy, and but before that, I have to tell a joke. Um, I had not or a story really. I had a very close friend who was also a mathematician, Serbian. See, he once told me that there are only three great professions,
Hmm.
right? And one is being a general, right? Leading soldiers, fighting wars. The second is being a writer, right? A novelist and telling stories. And the third is being a philosopher. So that these are the only three great professions. Everything else is second rate in comparison. And I was very offended because I was a mathematician and he was a mathematician. And it's like, wait, we are both mathematicians. Why are you not saying that our profession is one of the three great ones? He said, yeah. But those are the three great ones. And so philosophy, I think, has this capacity to illuminate everything, just as stories do, right? You can read a great novel or a great movie about pretty much any topic. And so philosophy, literature have this capacity to connect everything and anything. And so I think that's what, I mean, there's a specialized training in mathematics or cognitive science, how the minds work. There's these difficult problems like climate change where you need to understand the science, you need to understand policy choices, but you need a glue. You need something that helps you make sense of it all. And philosophy plays that role.
Okay, interesting. I never thought of it that way. But well, thank you. So I am a storyteller. I am a philosopher. So that checks the box on two.
There you go. You just need to become a general and you'll be all set.
So I am good where I am for that. So, and how are you using AI or technology, because having maths as a very strong background, technology
Yeah.
follows with it. How are you using that to really create impact or add to your work?
I'll be honest, it's not like I'm directly a creator of technology. Though it's something that I'm adjacent to. But the digital technologies that we have today have a reach that absolutely nothing else ever has had, right? And so one of the most important uses of technology is to convey fact-based stories on climate change that can be hyper-local, for example, right? So
Mm.
let's say, Ashu, you are in Bombay. Where in Bombay are you, if I may ask?
South Bombay.
Right? So let's say you're in Colaba. Um, Now, Colaba is right at, on the ocean. If the ocean levels rise, then a lot of the most expensive property in India is going to be underwater, right? And so there are going to be very hyper local climate stories that are valid for South Bombay that won't be valid for, if you go outside a little bit. Pune will be different, for example. So being able to bring technology to bear on the specific issues of where you are. I think that's one of the biggest opportunities.
Hmm, okay. Yeah, fair. Actually, when you put it like that, yeah, we do. I mean, my coastline where I live is near Haji Ali. With all
Uh,
the reclamation that's happened, my coastline has just moved further out.
and somebody is going to have to build some very expensive seawalls to keep that coastline from vanishing, right?
But it also does a lot of damage, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, at the end of the day, this progress that we celebrate comes at a price.
There are winners and losers in every game, sadly.
What have you seen if one had to look in balance?
What have I seen? Winning or losing, or what?
Yeah, like if you had to say, progress and the cost of progress.
Yeah. I am by nature an optimist and probably a progressive, which means that my bias is that things can get better.
Okay.
Right?
So,
Yeah.
so on that note, you know, you work obviously, I'm sure, collaboratively with a lot of people to make this mission of yours of climate change happen.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen in terms of who are the kind of partners who are able to really help you drive your mission forward?
There are so many. I mean, really, I mean, there are partners who are working with rural communities across India who um, are bringing climate awareness to farmers and others. Farmers are, of course, seeing it every single day, right? But how do they respond to it? What are their challenges? How can you bring their needs to people who can make decisions about them? I mean, these are the kind of things that we can't do on our own. We are a small uh, organization. So working with partners to reach people at the last mile, so to speak, is a huge part of our work. But then there are other things that partners help us do. Partners help us. So we do some technical work, but climate change is a complex geophysical atmospheric challenge. So we don't do that heavy modeling that requires computing, which someone else is doing, and we help translate that, make it more available. But we need partners who do that basic science, for example. So that's the other direction in which we need partners. Um, then we need partners who at some level are driving the behavior shifts that we want. So, to give an example again, going back to agriculture, we may want to shift away from using chemical fertilizers. Right? Yeah, India has a huge fertilizer subsidy, by the way. We gave about, and because of the war in Ukraine, it's become a lot more expensive. But we give about $20 billion worth of subsidy every year. Now, most of that is for urea. Urea is a huge carbon emitter. So if we can shift away from that, then we would be making our soil better. We'll be creating less carbon emissions and hopefully laying the foundations for more sustainable agricultural systems. None of this is possible without partners.
You know, obviously, I mean, it's a very big ecosystem. It's a
Mhm.
huge ecosystem that requires backward and forward, both ways, collaboration and integration. Coming to, the concept of sustainability and happiness again are correlated. Your views.
You know, there's a study which keeps getting thrown up that people are get happier and happier till they have about some amount of money. I think in the US supposedly it's about $75,000, and then it plateaus. I actually think that's not true,
Mm.
but and there are critiques of that. But there's some sense that if you have enough, then you're happy, right? And if you have much, if you want to get more and more than that, maybe your happiness is going to decrease. So there's some truth to that. And so I feel like I'm again, maybe this is the pessimistic side of me. I'm not sure if there is any limit to greed. And so I'm not 100% sure if sustainability and happiness go together or not, but ideally they should, right? I feel like if we are, I mean, there's a famous saying of Gandhiji, I think, where he said that the world has enough for people's needs, but not for people's greed. So I think that is actually true. As in, like, if you, for most of us, if you are with family, if you are with friends, if you have good food, if you have a nice environment and you have work that fulfills you, that's more than enough. So, and that's a pretty sustainable way of living. It's that unfortunately we don't have a system which stops at that, right? If it could just deliver that and leave us alone, we would all be happy.
Yeah, if only there was a bell that rang which said when you're tipping over,
Yeah, yeah,
life would be so much easier. We would not be then just philosophers. I think that's where philosophy comes, whether to the rescue or to say that, listen, where have you tipped over and what do you need to do to pull back and question yourself?
yeah,
See, for me, end of the day, it's coexistence, right? Life is coexistence. The earth, I think the plundering that we do in the name, while I am an optimist, I think it's that's why I said it's that bell that needs to ring, because I think sometimes we forget, is it progress? Is it greed? Where are we just accumulating because we are driven by our ego rather than a sense of purpose? I think that question remains universal.
yeah.
And which is why climate change, according like you are bringing philosophy into it, is not just a hard science or an economic or political issue. It's as much a philosophy issue as well.
100%.
It's just that how much of it are you able to convey? Because do you see other people bring in climate change with philosophy, or do you think it remains addressed at a more economic, political, socio-economic issue rather than a philosophy issue as well? Because to me, it's very much as if I think somewhere philosophy is where it starts and then it becomes everything else.
I mean, it is the dominant way of looking at it is undoubtedly scientific, socioeconomic, right? I do think that once a crisis becomes impossible to ignore, then philosophy becomes a very important lens into it, right? Because it's like if you're living your life in that crisis, then you have to have a way of making sense of it. Um, so I so the best case scenario is philosophy isn't needed because we have addressed the crisis before it happens. But you know, uh,
Okay, I was
so
flipping it. I was saying, is philosophy needed so that we don't reach the crisis? But I guess then,
I'm just saying that philosophers play two roles.
hmm,
One is as early warning systems, right? That something isn't right. वो समय तो चला गया है. That like that's gone,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So now, so we are heading towards the crisis. We are in it. So the philosopher is also needed to make sense of it.
correct, correct. So coming back to the question of happiness, when I said, us is happiness and sustainability connected? Happiness is an evolving definition, and for people, it is often a moving uh, thing. What is your perspective and definition of happiness?
Wow.
I know that's a
My
low one.
I I think that I there's a usual. I mean, I'm a happy person. I so in that sense, I know happiness when I feel it. So let me flip that. I know when I'm unhappy. Okay, because I'm generally happy, so it's the background of my life. So I would say unhappiness for me is if the world is um, going in a direction that I feel is wrong. Okay, so it's not so happiness is the natural state. It is, I mean, no, there's that famous line of Robert Browning, I think, right? That God is in his heaven and all is right with the world. So that to me is happiness, maybe.
Yeah, that's a very perfect way of saying it. And you said that when you are not there is when you know that you need to get back. But what is it that, since it is your fortunately a very natural state of living, are there some practices you follow to stay anchored in that state?
Yeah. I mean, I guess by nature, I'm a meditative person. But I mean, I do some formal meditative practices too. But I feel like those are more in the direction of self-understanding than making me happier. Uh, so again, I would say that I use techniques to remove unhappiness rather than make myself happy. So some of those are sometimes you have to let go of the of whatever
Clutter we
anger that
collect.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and to say that, I mean, it's very, very hard to do. Don't get me wrong. I think it's more or less impossible, but at least ideally, you want to act in the world and not worry about the consequences, right? Famous
Yeah.
karma neva adhikaraste. So easy to say, hard to do. But if that can be done, um, that more or less keeps you happy, I would say.
Very, very true. I think it's like keep on doing your work and do your best and leave the rest. We have a question here today. What inspired you
Mhm.
to start Climate X? Which but really, read the whole question and you can probably just collapse it. What's an ideal
Mhm.
sustainable world we can currently look at, and how can technology help us live more sustainably? If we start course correcting ourselves now, how many years can we envision a sustainable planet? Now that's looking into really uh, glass ball, but crystal ball. So go for it.
All right. I am going to answer that pretty sharply. I feel like we are very far from being in a sustainable planet, right? So to assume that we could do some small things and get there, no, it's not going to happen. Um, I, if we really want a sustainable planet, we need to very, very deeply change the system that we are living in today. Um,
If you had to give
it needs
one one thing that you think we could all do,
consume less.
back to philosophy.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say that consumption is sadly the driver of the economic system. Like, there's we don't know any other way to make people wealthier than to make other people consume. So we got a problem, right? Because we have aspirations. Every one of us wants at least a decent standard of living, but we don't know how to get that without overproduction. So I think that the real challenge is how do we create systems that produce enough but not more? And then the question is, what is enough? So,
Again, a big
so how
question.
do we, yeah, how do we get ourselves to agree on what is enough?
And that is different for every human being.
Yeah, yeah.
So, any suggestions, for the youth who want to make a difference? The young today are keen to make a difference to the world. If there's one thing I've seen, this generation is more driven by purpose than maybe the earlier generation, which was driven more by success and wealth.
Mm.
Um, some words of advice or suggestion from you, other than consuming less. I get that completely.
I think don't. No, it's going to sound really cliched, but um, don't let your imagination be squelched by reality. Right? Reality is going to be complex, sometimes difficult, but um, I, I would say hold to some image of the future. Maybe that sustainable planet, which we may have different ideas about, but this idea that we can all live on this earth um, together and there's enough for every single one of us. I think that's a good um, talisman to have. But I think that if you're young, I mean, I feel like I'm young, at least in mind, not so much otherwise. But if you're young in your mind, I would say that the best thing to do is to find other people like you and hold on to them really strongly.
Yeah, the more collective consciousness, the more we come together, the more we can together make a bigger change. Yeah, that is, when you're talking about holding the image of a sustainable, clean, green planet, what image comes to my mind is, which always has been a very frightening image, of this movie Wall-E. So when I think of the world like that, I think it frightens me enough to say, what do I not want? What should I not be doing to be in that kind of a scenario where the only thing that can survive is a cockroach?
But I mean, I feel like we are not going to be there yet. It might happen I mean, there is a difference between catastrophe and apocalypse, right? Catastrophe is like the Second World War. I mean, it killed 50 million people, which is a lot. But um, most human beings still survived it. We don't want to go there again. So I would say that if we can avert catastrophe, we have won in this second round of this crisis, right? So, and I think that the young people that I see are have both the courage and the energy and the desire to do something about this. So I'm pretty hopeful that will happen.
On that very positive note, that we have a generation that is courageous and willing, we all continue to live in hope and faith, and to make the world a better place and a sustainable, happier place for all of us. So
Mhm.
thank you so much, Rajesh, for joining us today. Really appreciate the conversation and look forward to catching up sometime again.
Thanks, Ashu. It was a real pleasure to talk to you.